I would have just given you the whole reading, because that was disgusting. To get at the very beginning of the passage and not finish it, it's just aggravating. I hope you can forgive me.
It was aggravating.
It was aggravating. Okay, so chapter 18, verse, I don't know, I think I'm going to need new glasses again.
23.
23, all right, here we go, 23. No, Jesus replied, not 7 times, I tell you 70 times 7. And here's why. The kingdom of heaven is like a ruler who decided to settle the royal accounts. I think that's where we left it, or was it the audit?
There.
When the audit was begun, one was brought in who owed tens of millions of dollars. And as the debtor had no way of paying, the ruler ordered his official to be sold along with the family and property in payment of the debt. At this, the official bowed down in homage. I beg you to forgive me, Your Highness. Be patient with me, and I will pay you back in full. Moved with pity, the ruler let the official go and wrote off his debt. Then that same official went out, met a colleague who owed the official $20. The official seized and throttled his debtor with the demand, pay back what you owe me. And the debtor dropped to the ground, began to plead, just give me one more chance, I will pay you back in full. But the official would hear none of it, and instead had the colleague put in debtor's prison until the money was paid. When the other officials saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved and went to the ruler reporting the entire incident. And the ruler sent for the official and said, you worthless wretch, I canceled your debt. Should you not have dealt mercifully with your colleague? Then in anger, the ruler handed the official over to be tortured, and the debt till the debt was fully paid. My Abba in heaven will treat you exactly the same way, unless you truly forgive your sisters and brothers from your hearts. And that is the second reading from the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's say a quick prayer, right? God, I come to you this morning thankful and grateful for your wonderful goodness, for your peace that you endow and bestow upon each of your children's hearts. I ask that your wonderful presence and spirit would be with us so that we could feel and know and experience your love and your forgiveness firsthand, personal. Bless and keep this wonderful congregation as you continue to move in and through them into new avenues and new places. Continue to hold our hearts, Lord. We offer our love and our praise and our thanksgiving for all who you are and what you do in our lives. We thank you. Amen. Well, this morning I wanted to talk to you about the F word. How many people ever use the F word? That's terrible. You can bring it up, isn't it? It's the word forgiveness, okay? It's not what you're thinking. Forgiveness. I wanted to start off by telling you a quick story about a priest and a rabbi. I know you've heard these stories before. The priest was in his confessional, hearing the sins of his people, when he was called out to an emergency. Well, he thought to himself, I don't want to leave the confession time. People are going to be coming at this time to confess their sins, and I need to be here to respond to their needs, right? So he asked the rabbi who was next door if he would come over and fill in for him. The rabbi says, I've never done this before. How the heck do you expect me? I'm a rabbi. Oi! How do you expect me to fill in for you, the priest? It's nothing. I'll show you. It's really easy. So the rabbi sat in the same booth with the priest, and the first lady came in, and she said, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And the priest said, what did you do? I lied 3 times. Oh, all right, my child. Say 3 Hail Marys, put $5 in the till, and go and sin no more. So she felt good. She got that off her shoulders. Well, another guy came in a few minutes later, and he said, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And the priest said, what did you do? He goes, I stole 3 times this week. He goes, all right, well, just say 3 Hail Marys, put $5 in the bank or in the till, and go and sin no more. Well, the priest said to the rabbi, do you get this by now? This is not that tough. All right, I'll do it. So he went off to his emergency, and the rabbi sat as the third lady came in. She goes, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. And the rabbi said, what did you do? She said, well, I missed church and I dishonored the Sabbath. How many times did you do this? He said, 1 time. Oh, well, we're running a special 3 for 5 this week. Go and sin 2 more times and you're forgiven. I know that's bad. Laugh some more. I need your laughter. So forgiveness, we all need it. Now, wherever you're at in this life, whether you turn on the TV and you see something horrible coming out, which is going to be almost 9 out of 10 times anymore, or you're in traffic and someone cuts you off, or somebody in your own family calls you a bad name, or you're bullied at work or at school, whatever, they're going to have opportunity on a flipping daily basis to use the word forgiveness, right? And in this Joy series I wanted to talk to you about is that in order for you to have a happier life, a more joyful life, you have to learn to live in forgiveness. It's just part and parcel of finding peace and more joy in your life. Now, it's not because you're condoning anything or saying that what the person that's perpetrated something against you, what they did was right, but it's allowing you to find a peaceful path. Mayo Clinic, which you guys probably all know this, but I'm going to reiterate it. The Mayo Clinic stated that the act of forgiveness can positively affect up to 5 measures of health: the physical symptoms, the medication use, the sleep quality, the fatigue, and the mental health. That means that if you live and work and run your life by forgiving as often as you can, you're going to be healthier. You're not going to use as much medication. You're not going to have to go to the psychiatrist as much. You're not going to be as tired and overwrought and stressed out because you're using forgiveness to lower your heart rate and your blood pressure, and you're living in peace. Do you think it's worth it? I think it's worth it. Forgiveness is something that sometimes you have to kind of lean into. You know what I'm talking about? Instead of deciding to be angry and full of resentment and full of stubbornness, and it's a cycle, hatred is, and it feels good sometimes. Sometimes my husband and I have to tell you this frankly. He'll get bugged at me for something. Now, I probably shouldn't be sharing a personal thing with you, but I'm going to. He gets bugged at me over something. I go, honey, no, let's get over this. This is something little. This is not worth ruffling your feathers over with me. I did this, I said this, it was stupid, I'm sorry. But he likes, just like we all do, to feel angry. I mean, be honest. You want to cuss people out sometimes. Come on! And I'm sure it happens. Is it true? I think so. I think it's pretty easy, and we have many opportunities to cuss people out and to hold a grudge. And you think, and you think, and you think. I think sometimes when I've been in an argument with my husband, it's like it burns and it feeds and it grows in my head. You know that? Does it ever happen that with you? Probably not. You're perfect. But it feeds and it grows, and then everything in the past pulls up. Have you ever done that? Oh my gosh. Ah! He did it again! Can you believe that? I have been telling him not to do that over and over again, and here he did it again! He knows this pushes my buttons. Right? We like to feel the anger. But the longer we're in anger and resentment, it's a horrible, horrible, vicious cycle, and it pulls our energy down. It brings more stress on you. It does. Now, I want to talk to you today about a really funny passage. This story is hilarious. Now, I know he probably doesn't look hilarious. Peter is a full of himself type guy. Does anybody know a Peter? Just vivacious and jumps in, says things without thinking, impetuous. And, they were traveling in a big group. You understand it, right? Christ was there with his disciples, but there were more people than them. There were people that were waiting on them and traveling with them. It's a big group. Now, you think about a big group, say 20 people. You're traveling, you're walking, you're smelly, you're stinky. I always like that one of these days we're going to have movies where you can smell and feel the actual physical circumstances of the movie. But But anyways, I try to imagine this. Imagine this. 12 disciples. No deodorant. No showers. No bathrooms. No toilet paper. Okay. Moving from place to place. Hungry. Dirty. Smelly. Stinky. Not comfortable. Right? You have 20 people moving from town to town. They're looking for shelter. They're pitching tents maybe. They're by a campfire. Are they ever going to get into it, do you think? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You know they're going to get into it over something. Now, there was a rabbinical law back then that you were required to forgive 4 times. 4 times. Now, the first time someone did or said something obnoxious to you, you forgave. The second time, they did the same thing again, you forgive, right? Third time, you can forgive. The fourth time, the rabbinical law said, there's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with her. You don't have to forgive. So Peter knew this rabbinical law. And he was thinking to himself, man, I'm going to really show the Lord what kind of person I am. So he's not going to do it 4 times. He goes up to Jesus. He says, Lord, if I forgive my brother or my sister 7 times, isn't that good enough? What did Jesus say? Not enough. Not enough. Not 7 times, but 7 times 70. You know how much that works out during a day? 490 times. That's 1 time in every 2.9 minutes. Now, I don't know about you, but that would be hard. But what is Jesus showing us? The love of God, the forgiveness of God, and we're supposed to emulate that kind of forgiveness. Now, is that humanly possible? Well, it's hard, isn't it? But I think what the Lord is asking us is to lean into it, to give ourselves to it. And the more, like anything, we practice being positive, we practice offering love, we practice offering compassion, we practice forgiveness, the easier it becomes a second nature. I think that's what God is telling us here. Lean into it. Let it become second nature for you to forgive instead of holding on to resentment. And letting it build and letting all that negative energy and all those negative thoughts to pull you down, to bring more stress on your life. You know, there's a young lady years ago I read about. Her name was Immaculée. She was from the Tutsis, the Rwandan genocide. Do you remember that story? It was awful. She was a Tutsi, and it was the Hutus that were slaughtering with machetes countless millions of people. She happened to be saved because she was being housed in the house of her pastor in the bathroom with 7 other women for 3 months. Now, I don't know how big the bathroom was, but I don't even care if it's half the size of this doggone room right here. That would be hard, right? So say an average bathroom, 7 women were housed for 3 months, hidden from these horrible people who were hacking and killing every one of those young ladies' family members and friends. You know, when she was in there, she thought of the scriptures to forgive. You know, what the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. She had that in her heart, in her mind, in her soul, and it kept going and playing over and over and over again in her heart and mind. She didn't know how she was going to do that. She knew what was happening outside. Later on, when the rebellion ceased and she was able to be released, she found out for sure that her parents had been slaughtered, her family. She was able to get some healing and relief, and finally, months and months later, she came back to Rwanda, and she was confronted with one of the Hutu leaders who she knew had slaughtered her. What would she do? She leaned into forgiveness. And they looked at her, and she looked back. And she knew that it was so much hate and so much cruelty and so much devastation, and this was an impossible situation. But to lean into more anger and more resentment was just going to make it worse, and she leaned into forgiveness, and she did that. She found release and peace. You know, forgiveness is our present to ourselves. It's to you and it's to me when we lean into forgiveness. It eases your mind, it eases your soul, it eases your sense of stress. It's a present, it's choosing peace instead of that cycle of over and over again that we so often want to lean into. It's a present to you and I to choose peace and a wonderful path of reconciliation. And one of the hardest things in life is forgiving ourselves. I don't know about you, but I've made mistakes. You guys are perfect. You've never made a mistake. But you know how often it's really difficult to forgive our own selves sometimes. It's the hardest. And the scripture tells us, there's a couple scriptures that tell us, one says this, that as far as the east is from the west, so far has God removed our transgression from us. Psalm 103. And that Ephesians 4 says, and be you kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. So it's a given that God forgives us, right? That's a given. It's just like the prodigal son. We know that God's love and God's forgiveness and God's patience, always, it doesn't matter what you've done, what you've committed. It could be a mass murder. You can be some of the worst people in this world have been forgiven by God. You look at some of the biblical characters. Moses was a murderer, right? David was a murderer. There was all kinds of really those people. And that's what I love about the scripture. These are people that are very carnal, very human, very flawed, like you and I. And they know they have God's forgiveness. But forgiving yourself is another whole thing. You know, it kind of reminds me of a story of a little boy who was putting together, super gluing a model airplane. And he was taking the airplane wing and he was super gluing it onto the airplane, right? And accidentally, guess what happened? Got his finger caught in there. So he had the whole plane around his little finger, and well, they didn't want to just rip it off, right? Because that would take a chunk of his skin. So they finally found to solve it, but it was really hard. That was stuck on there like glue, right? It was really hard to separate his finger from the wing. And so often, our own guilt and shame kind of come along and stick to our souls like that wing did to that boy's finger. I'm sure you've heard people that when they talk about their kids, they don't highlight the good parts. They exemplify the bad. Like, you know, the guy that was talking about his 4 kids. He said, Timmy's always late. He'll be late for his funeral. Lynn over there, I love Lynn, but man, she just loves dirt and it piles up on her. You know, Tom over there is always just like his dad, getting into a fight one after another. Well, you know, we have that voice in our heads. That father, that criticizing father or mother or friend that's always replaying all the things that we've done that we could have done over and over and over and over and over and over in our own heads. That's tormenting. We're to be kind and tender-hearted and loving and forgiving to each other, but guess what? To ourselves. We need to love and have compassion and self-forgiveness for ourselves. To have peace and joyful life. You gotta give yourself a break. You're only human, doggone it. Yeah, you have regrets. I have regrets. Who doesn't have a regret? Or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 100, right? Let the past stay in the past and go on. Today, in a new day, in a new mind, in a new heart, full of more happiness, more peace, by forgiving yourself. There was a firefighter I read about years ago. You know, we love our firefighters, don't we? Oh my gosh, what a thankless job. putting on one of those suits and going into a rip-roaring fire. Man, oh man, to save some lives, right? This young man had a long shift. You know, sometimes their shifts are real long. They keep going out when they're called. He was on for maybe 2 days, and he was really tired. And on the way home, guess what? He fell asleep. He had an accident. He killed a young lady. She was pregnant. He injured her daughter in the accident. And charges were brought against him. Her spouse was a young pastor, and he could have been very full of resentment, full of anger for that, for robbing him of his wife and his future daughter, for injuring his other child. But instead of choosing to remain in unforgiveness, he leaned in. He gave it a chance. Often all we have to do is make that first initial lean, and then God meets us the other way. He started meeting with a young guy. He actually had his fines reduced. That young man was torturing himself over and over again for killing a young lady in an accident, bringing the death of her baby and injuring the other child. He was torturing himself, as anybody would be. Would you not be? Because this young pastor leaned in, offered love, offered forgiveness. The man was able to walk through that horrible experience, as was the pastor. We became friends, continued that relationship. Forgiveness is something it's a wonderful gift that we give ourselves. It's a wonderful way of walking in peace, continuing to grow in the fruits of the Spirit. So I want you to go home, think about the F word, and use it.